Now to these bitter cold temperatures we're facing. This week, our first warned weather team has reported on the dangerously cold temperatures we're expecting over the next couple days. Several organizations in Minot are banding together to make sure those without shelter can stay warm. Lindsay Miller has the details.
As temperatures dip well below zero, the Minot Alliance to End Homelessness is offering an emergency warming shelter.
This is where we're going to be set up.
The center is a collaborative effort between the Alliance, First District Health Unit, Thursda United Way, and other local nonprofits. It will be located at the Salvation Army.
We want to make sure we have an option so that our neighbors can have a place that they can go and not freeze outside.
Trevor Reed, a Corps officer with the Salvation Army, says the center will have food, blankets and clothes, all free of charge. Christy Miller with Thursda United Way says this will serve as Minot's only warming shelter.
The Minot Alliance to End Homelessness has been working for 2 years now on finding a permanent solution.
Miller mentions they are continuing to explore long-term options. Reed says the shelter is open 24 hours. He explains there isn't a time limit on being there, but it isn't for a permanent stay.
Get warm. There's not a expectation of if you're in, you got to be out by a certain time.
No pre-registration is required. You can just show up and sign in. Reed says there will be some information asked when you come in the door.
This weekend, the warming center is low barrier, so come as you are.
A warm-hearted service in cold temperatures. In Minot, I'm Lindsay Miller, reporting for your News Leader.
The shelter is open today, tomorrow, and Saturday. Organizers say they may keep it open Sunday pending the weather. If you're interested in volunteering or donating blankets and warm clothing, you should contact Thursda United Way.